Hi, how's it going? My name is Taeyoon. I'm here in Seoul, South Korea, and I'm making a video for the Bang Bang Con that's happening in New York City, but also everywhere in the world. I'm gonna give you a tour of Nagwon Sanga, which is Nagwon Department Store, one of the historic shopping mall, especially for musical instruments, technology for creative expression. And I'm just hanging out in the hallway just to give you a tour of the amazing shopping mall. Right. Are you ready for this? This is gonna be like a really cool retro tech art exploration back to the history, to the origin of where art meets technology. All right. Oh yeah, here it is. So these are karaoke specific computer hardwares that just runs these musical notes and then sing along data. And then people use it to perform live, and it's a really unique machine. I don't think I've seen it elsewhere. And if you like guitar pedals, this is gonna be your heaven. Every single Boss pedals that you can ever want. Yeah, these are actually really cool. These are old school repair shops where you can bring in amps or any other hardware and then have it get fixed. Isn't this cool? And if you are curious about the stars who frequent this area, these are some of the old school singers and entertainers that you might be able to find, including a Buddhist monk. That one says Blue Jeans, Go-Go, Dick Family, Devils, Hisix. Awesome. Yeah, I just got this microphone from one of the stores. Thanks Bang Bang Con for sponsoring the equipment. Here's some more dudes, more fancy guitars, more keys. So these are like specialty shops for busking, for like playing outside. This says special sound systems for churches, dance halls, entertainment, rental. Hello, Cyborg. Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. Look at this beauty. ELF. So you can have, music, disco, different types of live entertainment. And look at that LED move. That is impressive. Oh, here's a store that you can have your speakers fixed. Look at just how amazing this shop is. And here's a section for pianos. Horn instruments, more strings. Oh, these are the traditional Korean instruments. I used to learn to play this when I was young. Those are wooden flutes. And more karaoke machines. I'm really excited to see the workplaces of these masters who have been working in the same shop for possibly a few decades, and the kinds of the attention to the point of repair of technology. So the aspect of repair and maintenance that is quite different from the other notion of innovation and progress, this linear growth of technology. It's needless to say that our worlds have changed just about now due to the coronavirus, and then everything about the structural inequalities that we see through the our lived experiences. This conference is for a lot of the creative technologists or technologists who have very innovative approach to seeing the world. And I want to take this opportunity to show you where I live and where I work, because I think there's a lot of truth to the ways in which these masters repair technology, the ways in which they think about the act of craft as much as the techniques, and their attention to details. And their attention to details is not just technical, it's really about the commitment to the art form, commitment to the techniques of creative expression. This is a very rare department store, even in Korea and in Asia. There are many other shops that deal with technology, but I think this is unique in a way that these masters have been here for years. And it's located pretty close to Cheonggyecheon, which is an area that does a lot more of the physical fabrication, and Ulchiro, which is connected to the wholesale of raw materials and other fabrication. So as I show you this area, you see that there's this crazy juxtaposition of different art forms, and anything ranging from karaoke automated machines to horn instruments to pianos and strings. And I just love this idea of the workshop that is exposed to the public. So you can see that how they approach the technology or their instruments is very much about their process and their philosophy of really mastering one types of instruments, and their willingness to fix things if things break and if things just run out of fashion. It's still welcomed here. It's welcomed as these objects, these tools are not discarded easily. You come here to fix it, and you come here to get it repaired. And I think that's what I want to talk about today, is our commitment to the new types of the world that we have and how we can be a part of it. And as you can see that I'm still wearing a mask, and things are quite calm here in South Korea compared to other parts of the world. However, I'm very cautious about the social distancing and the gatherings that I could go to. It's okay to go to the public now. The shops are open, restaurants are open in Korea, and things are coming back to more or less like what it was before. But I know that it's not the same in other parts of the world, and I am really mindful of the sacrifices that other people have made for our ability to move around in Seoul. So I'm very careful about that. But I also think this opportunity with the Bang Bang Con is like a perfect chance to show you where I came from, and the kinds of the relationship with tech spaces, poetry, and art that we have here that's different from New York or any other parts wherever you are. So let me show you the exterior of the Nagwon Sangak. Yeah, they say this was like the first department store that was built that's a mix of residential and also commercial. And you see a lot of old people hanging out there. And I'll see you soon. So I just walked from the store to Insadong, which is an area that's pretty popular among the tourists because they have this traditional shops here, a lot of restaurants. This particular shop is an old bookshop, and you can find old dictionaries, artworks, photos of artists from the past, map of this area, I believe. I'm a little intimidated to go inside because it's like a really serious shop, but I think you see this organization of archives and documents from the past. The guy's just like staring at me, so I'm just gonna walk away. But yeah. And speaking of which, so I'm delighted to find out that a bunch of people on the internet thought the Bang Bang Con was about the BTS, which is one of the top, here they are, entertainers that came out of Korea. So I believe it's just these 7 really talented young men who are really good at singing, dancing, and just entertaining. And I'm really curious to engage with like that fandom and like that fan group to talk about technology, identity, intimacy, and notion of care. Because one of the reasons that BTS is so popular is that they are not so much about putting up this image of a completely independent, like, macho identity. They're much more about being cool about like their insecurities, their vulnerabilities, their fears, and they're quite transparent about that. And I think that's new. So I think that speaks to a lot of the younger generation who feel like internet is not really a safe space, and like they didn't really see themselves reflected in the media. But the BTS songs and their lyrics are all about that kind of intimacy. So I'm really curious about that. I want to ask them why they love this group so much and what makes them different from other groups that are just around. Hey y'all, now I am in Hongdae area, which is a very popular college town, quite well known for its bars, restaurants, clubs, and the art scene. Then you can see a really beautiful moon out there. Let's see. So I used to spend some time here before I moved to New York. I think I had a studio here for a while. No, it's more like my friends had studio here, so I would just come out and hang out with them. Here's a really cool cart. Yeah, this used to be much more residential, and a lot of artist-run spaces that are quite experimental. It became a very popular hang zone probably around 10 years ago, and it's sort of became a mostly entertainment area. I'm like one of those like old people that talk about the good old days when this, like the area used to be much more authentic. That's not a very fun story. I think this is where like one of the oldest like artist-run gallery used to be at. Right here. Went to a lot of parties there. It's so interesting that now like people are not so surprised by people walking around with like their phones and like recording stuff. And I think it used to be pretty different. Look at all these cell phone accessories. All you can ever want. I think I'm gonna try to find a cute cafe to sit and write for a little bit. I just had a dinner with some friends at a gallery and took the subway to come here. And I got a gimbal, so I'm gonna charge that up and then see if I could use it. So I'm crossing this bridge. This used to be a train track, and it was a little abandoned over here, but it's quite nice to see it developed into this park. There used to be a really cute bookstore at the top of that building, the pointy building. I think it's something else now. Yeah, this is a really special area for me and many other artists who spent some time in Seoul. We see the sunset. And I'm gonna go to this tiny cafe and have some tea and write my talk for Bang Bang Con.
Hey, so
I was sitting at a really cute cafe called Sukara that does really good vegan cooking. I didn't take any videos in respect of the privacy of the people who work there and then other clients. I did think about my identity and how the quarantine experience has changed how I see myself and the world. I was self-isolated in Brooklyn in my apartment for about a month and a half. I had a pretty severe symptom that I believe was COVID. I had a hardness of breath and other pain. I couldn't get tested, so I just lived through it. I got a lot of help from friends and strangers who just offered so generously to bring me food and check up on me. But it was also a very isolating experience. I live alone and I don't have any family members in New York or the United States. And I can imagine that a lot of the audience for this talk are going through something similar. Physical pain was difficult, but it was essentially the isolation and the sense of kind of being cut off from the world. This idea that the social distancing became physical distancing, that became emotional distancing. I think this is a really hard time for a lot of us, and I do want to check up on this notion of the identities that we are enforced from birth. So growing up in South Korea, which is a very heteronormative space, I didn't have a lot of chance to think about my gender or my identities until when I was older. And I didn't know that a lot of us could have many gender identities inside of us. It was quite common to hear why are you a man who act like that? Why are you a woman who act like that? It's quite easy to say such things, but it's actually enforcing gender normativity, and that leads to possibly a toxic relationship with your own gender or other people's gender. Many people in these societies are assigned one or the other gender when we're birthed. So men are expected to have masculinity and women are expected to have femininity. And in our homes, workplaces, schools, we are expected to perform those binary gender roles. But I think that's not fair. Just like there are so many numbers between zeros and one, and oftentimes those spaces, those numbers are the most beautiful things that we can find in this world. There's many gender roles, many identities, many personalities between ourselves and each other. If the quarantine experience of being isolated is something that we cannot avoid and something that we should respect, I wonder if there's a way for us to unpack this heteronormative kind of toxic approach of binary gender or binary identities. For example, this could expand to this notion of nationalities or ethnicities. Are you just a one nationality or are you multiple? And it could also be your trade. Are you a technologist or social justice activist or both? So these are not exclusive, but I think in the world that we have lived before the coronavirus, the world in which that was very fast and the one that focused on growth, I think we had not a lot of choice but to think of ourselves as one or the other, so 0 and 1. But I wonder if we can think about everything in between that, everything between black and white, meaning the black being 0 and then white being 1 if we're to compare the binary information to grayscale, and also between man and woman. And I'm just so fascinated and inspired by the genderqueer movements, LGBTQ friends that I work with and hang out with. And I think we have a lot to learn from them, particularly thinking about Bufu, which is a collective that does really amazing organizing. Press Baltimore, it's another collective that I look up to. Yellow Jackets collective. And
I think the tech spaces have a lot to learn from community organizing as such. I just will say that even the diversity initiative in the tech world seems to be pretty heteronormative about what they're thinking in terms of representation and equity. So how can we queer the tech spaces? How can we think about different kinds of equities in learning and also developing these new modes for ourselves? And I want to ask all of you to think about that because I think that's essentially related to care, repair, and maintenance. So ourselves as a machine, like our bodies and our mind as this something that we need to take care of. And perhaps our bodies and our identities are not such so binary as we might have thought before.
Hey, so I'm in my family home and it's about 9 a.m. and I'm just getting ready to write this talk that I have been meaning to write for such a long time. And I just want to say how much I love conferences. I really like boxed coffees or like coffees that come in this big plastic bins that you can just like pour out. And I'm having some coffee now. I love name tags. Like I love writing on it. I love reading other people's names and like their preferred gender pronouns, what they're interested in. I love like pastries that are a little bit old and stale but like still good and like you just want to like have a lot of them. I love giving talks in front of an audience. I love watching talks. Mostly I just love like meeting new people. And the coronavirus has really changed how we interact with each other and how we think about physical spaces and convenings in real life. It's really difficult to have that kind of a intimate relationship just over these video conferences. But I think we are trying to do our best, and I think we're learning a lot about ourselves and our spaces and how we relate to each other digitally and physically over this experience. So I'm gonna try to give you a little bit of tour of my studio, what I'm working on, and what I'm thinking about. So there's a tiny birds up in this pine tree, and here are some of the peonies, and this is where I study math. So this is a really old book. I think about like 40 years old. Um, Classic math textbook. I was actually looking into how exponential functions would work, especially in relations to graph that we have been seeing because of the coronavirus. I realized that, including myself, most people don't really understand how these logarithmic graphs work and how important it is to understand the relationship between numbers. So not only the absolute values, but the relationships. And I was thinking about how much I hated math growing up. And I was really bad at it. It turns out that I was mostly hating the math class and uh, a little bit about how the teachers would, deal with students like me who are just not good at math. So I realized it wasn't the math itself, but the act of learning math. So I started to relearn math on my own terms, and we have this magical world of numbers. The world consists of different data, some of which are human, very relatable, like this clock. Some of which are just logistics of having to, manage your life. These are just my to-do list. And I was thinking about this word "결," which is a Korean word based on Chinese character. And I looked it up, and there are so many definitions. In my understanding, it's like a texture of a network, like the fabric of a network. But it could also mean amass, knot, invent, prevent.
clot. So what is the network of math, or the numbers? Here I'm trying to understand inverse function, and it's kind of like there's a person at the top and then the person at the bottom. They're kind of like speaking to each other in this reverse function. And I have a friend named Jenny Odell who wrote a book called How to Do Nothing, which I highly recommend to people who are having trouble doing nothing. And we talked a lot about birds and sound and spaces. And one of the key takeaway from our conversation is that the time is malleable. Like time, or this quantified sense of time passing, is quite subjective. And how we think about time depends on how we think about space and our relationships to our habitat. So for her, noticing the birds, the sounds of the birds, is a way of reconnecting with herself and then the world. For me, it's been a lot about farming. So here is my little lettuce farm. And I knew a little bit about farming before, just growing up, but I haven't really done it in a while living in New York. I just didn't have the space. So I've been trying to reconnect with the earth and thinking about the compost and the life around me. There's a really famous philosopher. Her name is Donna Haraway. She's quite well known for his Cyborg Manifesto and etc. And recently she's been writing a lot about compost and then the critters of the world. The hard values of the math, meaning like this math as this absolute truth of the data. I wonder if there's a way we can think about the magic of numbers, including how compost is essentially a magic. Like you have this, soil, and you have these natural elements that are, sort of coming from the animals and other parts, and how we can think about these varieties of beings as the part of the magical, world. So there are the natural numbers, the whole numbers, integers, and rational numbers. All of these are quite different. So in my farm, there are lettuce, the compost, and there's a tiny pond, and not sure if you can see, but those are the tiny mosquitoes. I hate mosquitoes as much as anybody else, but it's also like I acknowledge that their existence. So I am really debating about what to do with these tiny, tiny mosquitoes. Part of me wants to get rid of them, and part of me wants to just like let them be. That's a conversation that I need to have with my rest of the farm team, which are here.